invest in and follow principles. That has proved to be pretty successful.
This landlord's gonna make almost $2 million over the next 12 years for doing something one time. And that's like residual. This guy's got another 7 retail spaces and he's got 10 stories of apartments above it. And I'm like, man, I'm on the wrong side of the coin, right? I need to own real estate, not broker it.
You start doing deals that are absolutely life-changing, like that put you on the path for intergenerational wealth.
Welcome to the Real Estate Home Runs podcast. I am your host, Luis Vanderhorst. This is a podcast for busy professionals who want to learn about passive income producing strategies that have helped others crush it in the real estate world. Whether you are a new or seasoned real estate investor, this is the podcast for you. All right, welcome back to the Real Estate Home Runs podcast, everyone. Today's special guest is Mark Dolfini, all the way from Indiana. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Man, it's good to see you, brother. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I learned about Mark through the National RIA. They were hosting a webinar that Mark was leading. And come to find out that I was just like 5 minutes away from where Mark lives in Indiana, Lafayette. I was umpiring last summer and I was just 5 minutes away from the stadium where Mark lives.
Yeah.
So small world.
It is. It's pretty cool. Yeah. My office is literally a good home run away from where, yeah, I don't know that a ball could quite hit, a foul ball wouldn't hit my office, but I suppose it could bounce that far. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I feel like the topic that we're going to be discussing here is not one that people really touch upon. And it's property management, being a landlord. And not only that, but like, what is our vision? What is our purpose? How do we want to design our lives? So I think you guys are in for a treat here. So Mark, tell us your background, what you did before real estate, and then how you got started with real estate.
Yeah, well, thanks, man. So really, I did not grow up in Indiana. I actually grew up in upstate New York, not too far from the Baseball Hall of Fame, actually. So I grew up in upstate. I did not much in high school. I graduated in the top 98% of my class. And so if you do the math, as the bottom 2%. So I did nothing in high school. And the reason I mention that is because people often will come into these limiting beliefs of I'm not smart enough, I don't have any money, I don't have, whatever. You can come up with any number of excuses as to why you can't be successful. But the real truth is it's all nonsense. It's all head trash. And certainly I got pretty good at learning about how to do the minimum to get by in high school. I still managed to graduate, but barely. Went on to 13th grade, which was a community college there in New York, and then decided I need to get some direction. Went to the Marines, who are professional tail jerkers, and they jerked a knot in my tail pretty quick and really got me straightened out. And I was very grateful for my time in the Marine Corps. And it was during that time where I realized that if I'm going to be I'm either going to be cannon fodder or, I'm going to be something different. And I had a really good time in the Marine Corps. I learned a lot about myself, became very self-sufficient. And it was during that time that I decided I need to get an education. So left there, came to the Midwest, set up a home here in Lafayette, Indiana, went to Purdue, got a degree in accounting. And while I was in school at Purdue, I started buying real estate. And it was during that first year that I really learned about how banks loan money, which was very different back then. This is back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So learned how banks loan money, learned, how to buy real estate with not much of my own money. And by the time I got out of Purdue, I had about a dozen rental units altogether. I had about $500,000 worth of real estate. So that's how I got started.
Awesome. And that's impressive to finish your college career and already have a few rentals under your belt. How was that first property like, and what helped you be able to pull the trigger and get even past those limiting beliefs that we sometimes fall into?
Yeah, that's a great question, because usually the first property really helped me realize that it was possible. Now granted, I made every mistake I could possibly make in that first property, and I got probably paid a little bit too much for it. I probably did way too much work on it. I made it very personal. None of it about that first purchase even remotely resembled a business transaction. It was all very, fly by the seat of your pants sort of thing. And probably the biggest mistake that I made looking back, and this wasn't just for the first property, but for many of the subsequent properties that I bought, it was more of, I can do whatever work needs to be done on that property. And I never really placed a value on my time. So as a result, I just did everything. I created a bunch of little jobs for myself that as I scaled up from the dozen rental units up to ultimately 92 rental properties or 92 rental units up to that, before things went sideways in 2008, every time I bought another property, I was adding on another dozen little jobs for myself that somebody had to do. And because I wasn't valuing my time, I was the one having to do them.
That's good. Are there any tangible ways that you kind of took that shift to going from like you taking on all these tasks, taking on all these responsibilities to make things more efficient?
Yeah, I would love to say that it was by design, but it was really more by providence. God has a way of kind of realigning you when you needed it. So what ended up happening was I had decided that I really wanted to get really serious about my rental property investing. I ended up, I was working in the corporate world. I fit in the corporate world with like a square peg. And when I finally got out on my own and I was doing this full time, I had about 30 rental units at the time, and I was able to build up through a hodgepodge of creative financing and wheeling and dealing up to 92 rental units. So with that 92 rental units that I had, again, I did everything. I was doing the leasing, the showing, the maintenance, answering the phone call, opening the mail, doing all the bank deposits, filing the evictions, collections. I mean, if you name it, I did it. I was on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I was working for a tyrant. And that tyrant would never allow me to have any time off. That tyrant would never allow me to be sick. That tyrant would never allow me to not answer the phone. I was working for a miserable boss, and that miserable boss was me. So fast forward to, it was 2006, and I'm sitting there thinking, and I remember thinking, my gosh, I got to go through another 25 years of this before stuff starts to pay off and my life gets better. Like, this is terrible. There's no way I'm going to make it. And so really what ended up happening back in 2008, when the labor market fell apart, and I thought that I had, keep in mind, this is about $6 million worth of real estate. I thought I had plenty of cash setting aside for a rainy day. And so in that $6 million worth of real estate, I had about $150,000 worth of cash sitting aside, which I thought was, again, now I'm beating the OPM drum, other people's money, right? I was beating that drum louder than anybody else could have. And what I didn't come to understand is that using other people's money is fine, but you've got to have enough of your own money for when these Six Sigma tail events come along, like a mortgage crisis that basically guts the economy. And that's exactly what happened. So when I had the $65,000 a month coming in revenues, that $65,000 a month went to $30,000 a month. And I burned through my cash like very quickly. It was just maybe just a little over a month that I burned through my cash, because not only was the revenues gone, but I also had to use that money to get these properties turned so I could get them re-rented. And I just burned through all my cash in like 45 days. It was not much time at all. So as a result, instead of working 12 and 14 hours a day, I work 16, 18, sometimes 20 hours a day just to try to keep the balls in the air. And of course, you don't have to think that hard to think, well, you can't keep up that pace for very long until you get sick. And that's exactly what happened. I got sick, I got double pneumonia, and I almost died in the hospital, literally almost working myself to death.
Sounds like that was like the light bulb moment for you to restructure your life and reevaluate things and decide, okay, you know what, I can't continue to live like this. I need to pivot.
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. This hospitalist came into the room I was in the whatever, it wasn't ICU, but it was the critical care unit, the CCU. And she came in and she says, I was 37 years old at the time. I'm laying there in the hospital. And she says, people who look like you don't lay in hospital beds with things like this. She says, I think you really need to evaluate what you have going on in your life to see what you've got going on. And that was probably one of the best pieces of advice that I had. And of course, I'm ruminating, I'm laying in bed, I've got all these thoughts of people are saying, oh, you really need to hire help. I'm like, what was that going to do? Like, hiring someone into a disaster wasn't going to create order in my universe. So I'm laying there, I read the E-Myth, which if you haven't read the E-Myth, it's a fantastic book about following like a franchise model, in terms of creating a business. Books like The Ultimate Sales Machine, which talks about processes and creating a sales process and all this other stuff by the late Chet Holmes, all these books, right? Plus, I've got these people in my ear who are trying to help me out, telling me I need to hire help and everything. And all this swirl going around in my head. And it was around that time, I'm just laying there in this hospital bed for for 3 days, basically. It's the first day. I'm there for the, first hour. This nurse comes in and she says, I need to give you a shot in the stomach. To which I said, you need to work on your marketing. I said, no, you don't. I said, what's this shot for? And she said, well, you're going to be laying in bed for the next couple of days, and we don't want you to get blood clots in your legs. So we need to give you some Coumadin to thin your blood and make sure you don't get blood clots in your legs. I said, all right, hold on a second. I said, you got me hooked up to some sort of IV, right? And she says, yeah. I said, the IV is on wheels. I said, I can get out of bed, right? And she looked at me like I was asking her to explain Michael Jackson. And I said, she goes, yeah, you can get out of bed. I said, okay, how about I get out of bed every so often and just walk around? So long story short, she took her needle and she went away. Not long later, another nurse came in with another needle. And she says, I got to give you a shot. And I said, well, what's this shot for? And she said, well, you're on this steroid, prednisone, and the prednisone is jacking with your blood sugar. She said, so I need to give you this insulin and that will level you out. I said, well, what's my blood sugar at? And she told me. And I said, what's it supposed to be at? And she told me. And I said, okay, how about I just don't eat any carbs today? And tomorrow morning, if it's still too high, you can give me the insulin. She says, okay, fair enough. So she takes her needle and she goes away. So as I'm laying there, I got thinking about it, that how in the world did those two know to bring those two specific drugs based on what I was there for, right? Because there's all people, I mean, people were there in the critical care unit for all sorts of different things, right? But the reason they knew that is because they were operating within a system. Something somewhere tickled, was a tickler to say, hey, he's taking this sort of medication, whatever, or he's going to be, in this situation. So, he may need this, right? And it got me thinking about all the things that were basically wrong in my life because I'm laying there in this hospital bed. There wasn't a whole lot more to think about. And really there was 3 different buckets that things kind of landed in as I'm thinking about all the things that were just swirling around in my head. Because of course I couldn't take any phone calls. What would have been the point? So I'm basically, it was just trapped there with my thoughts. So the first bucket was everything that I was doing was in response to something. It was just who was yelling the loudest. It was all reaction based, right? I could never seem to get ahead of anything. So I had no real defined processes at all. No process. It was all up in here. It was all up in my head. So processes was like the first bucket that I realized, that I needed help with. The second bucket was I had no, even if I had well-defined processes, really, I had no infrastructure. I had no desks, no chairs. I operated everything out of my truck with a laptop and a laptop stand, with an air card that I could plug into the internet and a printer that sat in the back seat, right? I mean, it was ridiculous. It was, there was no efficiency built into this whatsoever. So even though people were saying, oh, you need help, well, what am I going to do? Walk them into an empty room and yell, do work, and then run away? That wasn't going to help the state of my universe, right? So I had no processes and I had no infrastructure to run those processes on. And then finally, I realized, why was I doing this thing for in the first place? Why was this important to me? I mean, I'd already been in the corporate world. I proved that I could make a living, in the corporate world, even though I really didn't enjoy that. But why was I doing this thing? What was my end goal? What was it that I was trying to accomplish? So I realized at that point, I really had no clear vision in terms of what it was that I wanted for me personally. So those 3 buckets, the vision in terms of what it was I was trying to accomplish, the infrastructure in terms of what the business needed to look like in terms of the desks, the chairs, and the software and the computer systems and all that. And then finally, the processes. I needed a standard operating procedure on just how to do stuff, right? And with that framework, is really what I wrote about in the Time Wealthy Investor 2.0 is the vision infrastructure process framework that I use to create whatever business that I happen to be getting into at any point in time.
That's a good acronym, and I believe you call it VIP.
Yeah.
The vision, infrastructure, and processes, that they all intertwine together.
Yeah. And really the thing about vision, and people, a lot of times, I travel around to quite a few different RIA groups and landlord associations and so forth. And I'll be standing in a group, I'll be standing in the crowd and we'll be mingling or networking and stuff like that. And people I'll talk to some folks and say, what is it you do? And I'm a coach, and this sort of thing. And they find out Landlord Coach and so forth. I'm like, oh yeah, I really want to get into some rental properties. And I'm like, oh, really? I'm like, well, what is it you're trying to accomplish? To which they always say, oh, I want 100 rental properties, right? Which, by the way, it's always in increments of 25. Don't know why. It's always increments of 25. 50 rental properties, 100 rental properties, whatever. It's always increments of 25. I say, oh, okay, so you want 100 rental properties? Yep, 100 rental properties. So 99 wouldn't do it? Well, I mean, 99 would do it, but okay, 90. How about 93? I mean, 93 is a prime number. Would 93 work, And what we'll do is I'll keep going down in the number until they finally realize that what they're doing is they're confusing the number of rental units with the level of life output that they think that that's going to buy them. So let me say that one more time. They're confusing the number of rental units with the level of life output that they think that that's going to buy them. So it's really not about the 100 rental units. Now, granted, I recognize that you feel really important when you walk in and you go, oh, I've got 100 rental units, and everybody else in the room goes, oh, wow. Like, I totally get that, right? Totally get it. Like, I was that guy at one time. Now, couldn't care less. Could not care less. Because if I can accomplish the same amount with, say, 20 rental units or 23 rental units that are generating $2,500 a month in free cash flow, and I get the same juice from that squeeze, why in the world would I want to make my life more complex to impress a bunch of people that I don't give a crap about? Gary Vaynerchuk said it much more abruptly and much more brash, but his point was not to be lost. And why are you going and doing things to impress people that you don't give a crap about? And that is so, so true. So really, when you get really clear about what your vision is in terms of what it is you're trying to accomplish, it's not about the 100 rental units. It's about, no, if I'm being really clear, and after I beat people up for a little while on an initial coaching call, I beat them up and say, hey, what is it you really want? And finally, a lot of times choking back tears are like, I really want to spend more time with my spouse. I really want to spend more time with my kids. In fact, I want to expand my family. I want to go have more kids. I want to homeschool my kids. I want to travel with them, right? Like, I want them to experience things that I never got to experience as a child, or I want to go on a mission trip. I've never done that before, or whatever, right? They've got all these different things. And it's pretty rare that I talk to someone that's being authentic with me, that isn't trying to improve the world in some way. And I think that's pretty cool. So when you're being really honest with yourself about what it is you're trying to accomplish and what your real purpose for being here is, then you can say, oh yeah, that's the mechanism, the 23 rental units or 71 rental units or whatever it is that you decide on, that's going to generate $32,417 a month in revenue. So I can X. And whatever the X is, that is your vision. Because you're not getting caught up in the mechanism that's delivering that vision. It's just a boat. It's just a vessel to get you from here to there. So let's say, for argument's sake, in terms of the VIP method, your vision, for example, is to lay on the beach for 2 months out of the year rubbing cocoa butter in your belly. That's a fine vision. Maybe not a great visual, okay? Yeah. But a fine vision, right? The reason why infrastructure comes after that, you define your vision, is because when you start developing your infrastructure, you're going to develop your infrastructure with your vision in mind. You're going to develop your infrastructure that's going to be in alignment with that vision. Because if you're going to develop an infrastructure, let's say you develop an infrastructure that's going to require you to return emails and phone calls in a timely manner, right? That's going to be a terrible experience for you when you're laying on the beach trying to rub cocoa butter in your belly, right? Like, I've seen people, working from the beach, look how cool I am. Dude, I've worked from the beach and it sucks. It's awful, right? Like, it's the worst ever. You're there, everyone else is having a good time, and you're on the phone standing off to the side, like, it's just awful. And I've been there. So when you're creating infrastructure, you're doing that's in alignment with that vision. And the infrastructure is, like I said earlier, the desks, the chairs, the software, the computer systems, the desks, it's the phone system. If you have a phone system that looks like this, I'm holding up a cell phone. If you have a phone system that looks like that, you no longer get to complain when your residents call you at 2 a.m, because that's what they know, right? So the infrastructure also includes, by the way, your asset class selection, which could be single family dwellings, multifamily, parking garages, self-storage units, whatever. It also includes part of your infrastructure, because you're going to create an infrastructure that's in alignment with that asset class, right? And that's just appropriate. And also, finally, you're going to have your processes. Processes for you military folks, that's the SOP. That's your standard operating procedure. That's all the tactics that you're going to learn from your gurus out there that are teaching you how to be effective and efficient landlords. Now, I approach it more from a top-down perspective, from a strategic perspective. I want to have a good strategy up front. I want to know at the end of the day what it is that we're trying to accomplish. There's some really good tacticians out there that are teaching some really, really good stuff. But if it's not in alignment with your skill set or your infrastructure or what it is that you're even good at, or even what it is that you want to do, then it's not going to stick. It's not going to work. So that's why the tactics come last. The tactics, Sun Tzu said, tactics before strategy is the noise before defeat. And I really believe that that's true, because it is, when you're starting and leading with tactics, I really feel like you're setting yourself up for failure, or just at least putting yourself into a position that you're just creating this miserable job that no one in the world wants to do. So that's why I put the vision, infrastructure, process method together, because when you have these processes that run on this infrastructure, all of that stays in alignment with the vision for your future.
So good. I hope everyone's taking notes, because these are things that are needed. And if we don't have the vision, then we don't know where to aim.
Yeah, it's tough, man. And I know that there's a biblical reference to that too. And, that without vision, the people will perish. And I really believe that that is very true, because we're just going to be wandering and wasting our time until we get really clear in terms of what it is. And I really don't even believe that vision is that is the end for everybody. I really believe that when you're looking at your purpose, again, for me, I believe that the vision is the keyhole that you look through to see your purpose. And depending on how you look at that, again, if it's a keyhole, you're looking at this other side of the room, the keyhole is only this big. The keyhole is only so big, right? It's teeny tiny. But when you get up to and you orient your eye in a certain field of view, and you look through and you see the room on the other side, and your purpose is this massive room that is so much bigger than your vision. That's why vision is so important to me, because for people to try to determine their purpose, and again, this is my truth, I'm not trying to be some philosopher here, but I've done a lot of study on this, because I recognize that as people were coming to me, when they see the Landlord Coach moniker and they're like, oh, we want to be better landlords. And I'm like, then I'm not your guy. I don't want to make you into a landlord. The irony is I don't want to coach landlords. What I want to do is I want to make you into a business owner. I want to make you into an investor. And even beyond being a business owner and being an investor, I want to make you into how about I make you into a baseball coach? How about I make you into a soccer coach? How about I make you into a big brother or big sister, right? How about I make you into a junior achievement volunteer? How about I make you into a volunteer that goes and digs wells in Kenya, right? Like that. Now we're talking some real purposeful stuff. Now we're talking some stuff that's going to change the life of someone else in your circle or in your world. And that could be massive for someone who grows up with no future, or someone who grows up with the most amazing future that they could possibly have. And that's why I get so fired up about this, because my bride and I, we have a wonderful and amazing marriage. We're actually going to be married 8 years next week. And we found out a couple weeks ago that we're going to be parents again. So, I mean, we're still parents, but of course we're expecting. So super, super exciting time for us. But what's really amazing about that story is, yeah, I'm coming up on my 50th birthday here pretty soon. My bride, she's 36. But the really cool thing about that is that about 4 years ago, my wife and I, we were done. We were done in every way. I mean, we were not honoring the marriage. We were just out doing our own thing. It was awful. And I'm going to be honest with you. If I didn't have the time wealth on my calendar, if I didn't have the ability to control my calendar the way that I did, there's no way my marriage would have survived. And I don't want to get too heavy here, but the point is that when I needed to take time off from work, from my income generation, I know that was a major part in saving my marriage, because I needed to take the time to invest to do that. And the reason why I get so fired up about this is because I know that there's so many marriages that are out there that where they're not having the fight that needs to happen, right? They're getting up at 5:30 in the morning, leaving the house by 6:30, working all day. They get home by 6 or 7. They're exhausted, right? And then they do that day in and day out. And then finally, when the fight happens, right? I don't need to tell you what that's going to look like, right? It's going to be Chernobyl all over the kitchen. And so, of course, things get said that don't need to be said and all the things, right? That's what I'm saying. We were horrible one another. We were not honoring each other the way we should have honored each other. And that is why it's so important to me, because I think there's too many marriages failing because they're focusing on the wrong thing. I think there's too many missed baseball games with the little ones that, oh yeah, I'll make it to your baseball game, and they catch, the last inning when they weren't even up. Come on, man. Like, I know what that's like to search the stands and see if my parents are in the stands, and they seldom were. I know what that feels like. And now it's pretty rare that I don't get to see a wrestling match or a baseball game or whatever it is with our sons. And sooner than later, they're going to be out of school, right? And we're not going to have that experience with them anymore. So for me, having complete and total control of your calendar, that is the thing that I really want to help investors and small business owners and people who have that struggle, because they don't have control of their counters because they created hundreds of little miserable jobs for themselves.
That's good. None of us want to run around the bases and make it to home plate all beat up, stretched out too thin.
Yeah, you want to be able to celebrate with your team and, and not have 2 broken legs by the time you get there.
Yeah. And as we're wrapping it up here, and I kind of get a gist of it, but in your own words, what are 3 things that you feel like have helped you be able to hit real estate singles, home runs? Any tips that have helped you in your life?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things for me. Don't ever feel like you've arrived. You always have to absolutely positively educating yourself. Whenever I started feeling like I had it all figured out, that's when the time I knew that I needed to start cracking into some books or going and taking a course or something like that. And I'll tell you, I didn't realize how much I didn't know until I started coaching others. I spend a lot of my days doing research and studying and reading because that's where I feel like is the best use of my time. But as I'm looking at other people and taking that time and staying open to possibilities of the fact that what you're doing right now can be better. What you're doing right now doesn't have to stay the same. I mean, I know we as human beings have a tendency to think of where we're at right now is the way it's always going to be. And that's not the case. So always make sure that you're spending time on growth. You have to spend time on growth. And the best piece of real estate that you can ever invest in is the 6 inches right up in here. You have to continually educate yourself. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I'm educating myself on now is, really more neuro-linguistic programming, brain science, neuroplasticity, hypnosis, things so I can help people coach themselves better. And again, it has nothing at all to do with real estate, but actually it has everything to do with where I want to go in life. So in your guys' case, it may not just be cracking open a book on real estate. It might be cracking open a book on negotiation, cracking open a book on accounting methods, cracking open a book on different strategies for acquiring properties or how to manage properties differently, but not allowing yourself to get distracted in too many different directions because as great as real estate is, because there's so many different opportunities, that's amazing. That's the thing that sucks about real estate is the fact that there's so many opportunities, right? There's literally a million ways to make $1 million in this business. So that's probably the first and foremost is, lean into learning, stay coachable. But probably the biggest thing is always make sure you're placing a value on your time. Always make sure that you're placing a value on your free time. Because if you don't place a value on your free time, someone else is going to place a value on your free time. And it's going to be an amount that's far less than what you're actually worth. So those are the 3 things that I would suggest for everybody.
That's good. So never feel like you have it all figured out. Educate yourself, place value on your free time, and keep reading.
That's it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Keep leaning in, man. That's it. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. So how can people stay in contact with you, learn about what you're up to, or even get a copy of your book?
Yeah, you can go to landlordcoach.com. There you can get a copy, or I think right now it's $8, maybe just a little bit under $8. I'll even sign it, if you want, and that'll basically make the book worthless. You won't even be able to give it away at that point. You might be able to hold up a short leg of a table, I suppose. But if you're looking for, kidding aside, if you are looking for, it is more process oriented. Again, vision, infrastructure, process. That's everything, unless you want to send Jeff Bezos some more money, or to Amazon. But otherwise, you can go on to my site, get a lot cheaper, and you can get a copy there. I'm also on YouTube. You can follow my massive following. I think I just crested 250 followers. So I try not to take myself so seriously. I really don't care about metrics like that. I just want to make sure that I'm changing people's lives. You can always follow some videos on there on YouTube. But or you can reach out to me on my website. I'm on all the social medias that matter to me. I don't get that crazy with all the other ones, but Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, those are the ones that work for me.
No fun dances on TikTok?
Man, it's so funny. My wife sends me that stuff and I'm like, stop sending me that stuff because that is such a black hole for my time.
I feel the same way, but some people love it.
They do, man.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for joining me and for sharing so much content. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Luis, and best of luck to everybody.
We hope you enjoyed this interview and got some value out of it to help you in your real estate investing journey. If you can take just a minute, please do us a favor and leave a review. Hit the like button on iTunes or whatever platform you listen to our podcast on, and subscribe so you can hear future episodes. Also, don't forget to check out our Real Estate Home Runs Podcast Community Facebook group, where you are able to connect with some great listeners. If you're an investor who is crushing it and want to share some information centered around passive income in real estate, please contact us. Hit those home runs, and we will see you next time.